What's up, Coach Kevin?
Hello.
Oh.
Do you want to hear my didgeridoo impression?
Your didgeridoo impression? Do I have a choice?
It's the same as my Mongolian throat singing impression, though.
Oh, well, that's a real treat. If you're going to sell it like that, I mean...
I did enjoy your whistling, though.
Did you like that?
Mm-hmm. I felt like it needed some didgeridoo, but I didn't want
You could have didgeridooed your way right into that. Oh, let's see.
I didn't want to be told didgeridoo.
We have not. Have we figured out what the graphic says? I think it's 10,000% success, right? Isn't that what that says?
Weird. I looked it up in my dictionary, and I didn't come up with anything.
What was your initial impression of it, though? Like you had an initial rough translation.
It's like Nangan is like able to do.
We are able to do.
And then I forget what the other part was.
So did you ever watch Silicon Valley?
Uh-huh.
You did. Remember the Asian dude in the house that doesn't speak any English? So he's a comedian, and he has like I was watching YouTube clips of him, and he's pretty funny. So I recommend. I think his name's like Jeremy or something, or Yang. Jeremy Yang, I want to say.
I think I've seen his stand-up on Netflix.
He's pretty funny.
Yeah.
He's a funny gentleman.
So does that have something to do with the thing on the thing?
Because he talks about his name.
Mm-hmm.
And he says like his real name isn't Jason or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
It's like he says it in Chinese and he's like, and it means like success 10,000 or something like that. And he's like, my parents were very ambitious about my success, and here I am telling dick jokes.
My Chinese name means axe handle.
It means what?
Axe handle.
Wait, were you given a Chinese name?
Yeah.
Who were you? Wait, like your parents gave you a Chinese name?
No, it was I got it when I started studying in college, and then.
Axe handle?
Yeah.
Who gave you your Chinese name?
I forget. One of my old teachers, like my first teacher. I think it was like Li Masher. But yeah, it's just phonetically it sounds. It's a k sound, so they were just like, okay, we'll give you a k sound for your family name.
Oh, because it's Kevin?
Yeah. Well, no.
Kopecky.
Yeah, and then.
They don't have a straight translation for what does Kopecky mean? That's
hill person.
Is that really what it means?
It means
Kevin from the hills.
It's
Kevin Hill person.
Yeah, it's Czech for.
Oh, you're Czech.
Yeah.
Check it out.
But
that's pretty awesome. The Hills Have Eyes. Not one of my favorite films, but
I've never seen it.
You've never seen The Hills
watching,
Have Eyes?
I've been watching.
You got to watch the original The Hills Have Eyes.
I've been watching King of the Hill.
King of the Hill. I've never watched any King of the Hill.
It's so good.
Is it good?
It's really good.
What is the premise of King of the Hill?
It's like it's a satire of like American life, I guess, and like American values, and it's just
Well, who would satirize such a thing?
Mike Judge.
I mean, there is nothing sacred about American values and American way of life.
It's really good. I don't know.
I think after Beavis and Butthead, I like stopped. Like that was it. Like to me, it's kind of like after the first like 3 albums by Led Zeppelin, like that was it. They were done. Like why even?
But then he put out Office Space. He put out Idiocracy.
Yes, so those are live action. Like Office Space was live action.
Yeah, and well, I used to not like
it's a
King of the
classic.
Hill because of the animation style, and it was so similar.
What, Beavis and Butthead or King of the Hill?
King of the Hill was like I feel like one of the characters, or like Hank Hill, is based loosely off of a character that appeared in Beavis.
Yes.
Right, and then I used to just like, as a kid, I just like didn't get it because it was just like.
Because you were Beavis and Butthead.
No, I was like, I wasn't allowed to watch Beavis and Butthead.
You were not allowed to watch what?
And
did you have parents at home who actually supervised you?
No, well, it's just we didn't get it. I just didn't have access to it. I guess they didn't provide me with access to Beavis and Butthead as a child, right? But
did you have cable?
No.
You didn't have cable?
No, that's why I'm so weird.
What kind of like deprived were you raised by wolves?
Yeah, that's why I'm so.
You're actually remarkably normal. I would
unsocialized.
expect you have been wanted in several states for crimes against humanity, given the lack of access to, civilization that we all know and love as MTV.
But we had Fox, right? And Fox had like King of the Hill, Malcolm in the Middle, Simpsons, which were like I think, culturally significant. But I just didn't understand it as a kid because it's just like all these weird people doing weird things for reasons that I didn't understand. But I think it's a really good in-depth look at, like, you know, patriotic values, like religious values, like all the sort of things that I think people have and they don't really think about it too much unless it comes up.
Yeah, I don't have any of those values. That's what the funny thing is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say. I don't know why. I have none of those. What are they? Religious, patriotic. What was the other thing?
No, there's like so much. It's like,
No religious
American
values.
values, I think. Like
That seems like an awfully broad brush to
Yeah.
paint with. American
Well,
values. What is America?
I mean, in this show, America is Texas. And I
Oh,
really,
well,
I
there
really
you go.
enjoy that.
You're really talking about Texas values. They're like by Texans' own kind of claim, they are their own country.
Well, yeah, and so it's an interesting take on that perspective. And then, you know, they have these characters from this place with this very specific kind of way of life clash with different sorts of characters, and you know, problems come up, and it's
What is like
hilarity ensues.
What is the funniest episode you've ever?
I don't know. I wouldn't be able to tell you.
I mean, this is your favorite show ever.
Not ever, but it's great.
What's your favorite television show ever?
I really like Jessica Jones.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
It's the Netflix series.
I've never heard of it.
With,
That's not a television series. That's like Netflix. That's not television. That's Netflix. That's totally different.
Okay, so, all right. I guess we can't have this conversation.
Is that all you've ever watched in your whole life? Is Netflix?
No.
And that's your favorite? What is it? Jessica Jones?
Jessica Jones.
I don't think I've ever watched anything on Netflix. Was Game of Thrones on Netflix? No, that was
No,
HBO.
that's-
I watched Game of Thrones.
I like the.
And I watched, what was the other one? Westworld.
Yeah, I watched the first 2 seasons of that, I think, and then I stopped paying attention.
Yeah, it was a little much. Well, once you realize like how cruel humans are to these poor machines, you know, then I couldn't watch anymore because it felt so terrible as a human being. I was like, what is the point of? I was rooting for, you know, the machines to like rise up. You know, like it's kind of rooting for the Terminator, you know?
Do you think it's an allegory to something else, or is it just like a story about machines?
It's totally a story about machines. It's totally about.
Do the machines? Do you feel like the machine people in that story represent anybody?
Machine people? They're androids, aren't they?
Yeah.
Are you trying to suggest that there's some other deeper meaning to this story?
Well, I have no idea. I'm not smart enough to make such observations.
I mean, if you're smart enough to say that there's some allegorical meaning to it,
I think
you're probably smart enough to connect a few of the dots.
most stories have allegorical meaning, at least like narratives, I think.
These are people these are machines that were created to satisfy the pleasures of humans without any kind of and they actually are literally property.
So you think it's animal rights?
No, I'm pretty sure it's not animal rights.
You don't think that it's,
It could be,
it's
I
trying
guess.
to encourage a chicken revolution?
Well, that's Chicken Run, which I think is a wonderful movie.
Also quality.
Very deep, a very similar type of movie.
That was the Wallace and Gromit guy, right?
Yes. I love Wallace and Gromit.
I can't imagine having the patience to do stop motion claymation.
Yeah. I think that would be.
Fascinating.
I don't know what we're doing here.
What's your favorite jiu-jitsu move? Like, not armbar. Think smaller. Like underhook, overhook, staple, gable grip. You know, your favorite bit, your thing The thing that brings you happiness.
The thing
If
that
you have one.
of all jujitsu, like the tiny little things in
Yeah.
jujitsu.
Or like, what's the tiniest thing that you can think of that kind of fits this criteria?
The criteria being
Like the smallest,
like little
perceivable-
control.
like a unit of jujitsu. You know, we've got like staples, we've got underhooks, we've got overhooks. What else? We've got wedges. You know. What else?
I mean, I do enjoy
Yeah.
accessing a lever.
We got backpacks.
I like accessing levers.
Lever is that's too small. We can't go all the way down to leverage.
Why?
That'd be ridiculous. Because it's like that's everything. Your body is just made up of levers.
And wedges.
What are the wedges?
Huh?
Elbows? I guess.
I mean, your whole body is a wedge.
Is it?
Yes.
When?
Always.
Not now.
It's always potentially a wedge.
What do you mean?
If I just
This-
shove you like next to a door, then you would be.
But the body is just an assembly of levers. At least.
Well,
Like,
pulleys. Too.
Well, you've got these.
You've got pulleys.
Well, usually I'm thinking of bones right now.
Well, but what about all your ligaments? Those aren't
Yeah,
levers.
but-
Those are the things that activate and.
But I don't like as a person who's your opponent. I don't really have access to your ligaments, but I do have access to control your bones.
I mean, you do have access to my ligaments.
Kind
You can
of.
tear them out.
Yeah, but I can only do that.
You know what's
through
interesting
accessing control.
is that, you know, we use our ligaments to move, but the other person in jiu-jitsu uses we use our ligaments to move our levers, but someone else uses our levers to rip out our ligaments.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's
I always think of it like remember in Harry Potter the last bit where they're
No,
like
I never watched
magicking
it.
each other, and they're like, if I just focus hard enough, you know, I can push this ball of magic back into the other person's wand, and then it'll explode and I win. Right? It's like the same thing. We're all equipped with the same magic, I guess. Right? I can use leverage against you. You can use leverage against me, and it's like whoever has the most ability to use the leverage against the other person. And it's like, it was gradual back and forth of,
it's like arm wrestling.
yeah. Is it? How much? Yeah, there's a lot of.
I mean, arm wrestling is. There's a lot of technique in arm wrestling. I was watching for a while there. I was watching all the arm wrestling videos on YouTube. Those guys are. A lot more training goes into it than what I had initially thought.
But I feel like you see that in all the kind of 50-50-ish sort of positions. Like,
Think about nothing is more 50-50 than arm wrestling.
yeah. But there's not, I don't know. I feel like there's not as much. The use of leverage isn't that apparent, I think, compared to in jiu-jitsu, where it's more like, I don't know. Why do you think that arm wrestling is the best example of it?
I mean, I'm saying it is. I'm not saying that it is, but I think it's a good example of like a pure, a sport where, you know, mastery of leverage is integral to a win or a loss, right? I mean, and can make a huge difference in terms of your strength, right? I mean, in terms of your success relative to your strength. You know, there are a lot of guys who are, you know, totally. I mean, you obviously have to be really strong, but leverage is a big thing.
But it's not just leverage. It's
It's
also like
one of those things that's exceptionally simplistic when you look at it. It looks very simple, but there's a lot of technique. Like, you know, you talk about invisible jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of invisible technique in arm wrestling.
yeah.
At the high levels, right? Like if you and I just go and try to there'd be almost no technique. But you would have a very big, you know, leverage advantage because you have longer limbs.
Doesn't that take away the leverage advantage for me?
It depends on how you use it. That's why, right? Some guys that have shorter arms can use leverage differently than the guys with the
No,
bigger arms.
the
You have to
person
know.
in an arm wrestling match, the person with the longer arms is always going to have the disadvantage.
Not true.
That's how leverage works.
This just betrays your ignorance as to arm wrestling.
Okay, explain.
I'm not very
Why
good
would
at
a
it
longer
either.
arm?
All I can say is go onto YouTube.
Why would a longer
I don't know.
arm?
I don't know.
As far no,
I'm
in
not an arm
terms
wrestling
of
expert.
actual leverage goes, the shorter arm is going to have a higher leverage advantage in that game, right? Because they can put forth more power per square inch of movement, right? Versus the longer person, in order to output the same amount of work, they have to move their lever further.
Can you lift more? Why is it that, was it Archimedes says if you give me a long enough lever, I can move the earth?
Yeah.
You'd actually need something to rest that lever on too.
Yeah.
Right? So as the lever gets longer,
Yeah,
the force gets greater,
Yeah,
right?
your
It
arm
multiplies as
is
it gets longer.
yeah, your arm is the lever. I'm trying to break your shoulder, right? So
No,
as I'm-
you're
yeah,
trying to put your
yeah, I'm trying to rotate the
Yeah,
force.
but you're not breaking anybody's shoulder.
I'm not breaking it. I'm trying to cause.
I mean,
the
you
shoulder.
could probably hurt
No,
somebody's
that's
shoulder.
not what I mean. I'm trying to get the shoulder to stop resisting. I'm trying to make it break. Not break. I'm not trying to damage it. I'm
Right.
trying to get it to
Trying
stop.
to break the balance.
Yes,
Or break
I'm
the,
trying to break through
yes.
whatever is holding me from winning, right? And the longer this arm is, I'm going to have more leverage over this turning point.
So what, I'm not going to say that this is the answer, because I don't know, but when you see these guys, the grip becomes super important.
Yes.
So, even though you might have
Yeah.
this
Well,
50-50.
if I can angle my long lever
So, well,
into it, but is that leverage?
if I can angle my long lever into it, is that leverage?
Just because I'm
I think the
just
sentence
because
gives
I'm, no,
you
just
the
because
answer.
I'm using a lever doesn't mean I'm utilizing leverage, right? Because if I prop this in, no, if I take
All I
a
was
stick,
saying is that
if
the
I take a
bigger,
stick
all I
and
was
prop
saying
it
was
up-
that the person with the longer arm has an advantage because they're able to like go over the other
yeah,
person's.
but
hand.
that's not a
No,
leverage
I
advantage.
wasn't saying anything about leverage. I was saying that the bigger person has, it seems to have, at least to me, in my very primitive understanding of arm wrestling, that the person with the longer arm generally has an advantage. I don't know if that's true or not. It just seemed to me in watching these videos, on top of all the other skill things that are involved and the gamesmanship and the time, right? Because you have this moment, you see these guys, they're jockeying and they're trying to cheat,
Yeah.
right before the person says go.
I would maybe give it to
So
you.
there's explosiveness too, but like what's interesting is like Devin Larratt, who's like Hall of Famer, he's multiple time world champion. A lot of times he goes with stronger guys, and he will let them get to a certain point and try to get them to burn out, trying to put him down. And so.
But that's not leverage either, is it?
I'm not saying anything about leverage.
Well, I thought we
I'm
were
not
talking
saying
about
anything about. Why do you keep saying about leverage?
Because
I'm saying I'm
this
describing.
conversation
I'm just
started with that.
describing what this person's doing. That's it. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, what we were talking about in the beginning was how the
Yeah,
arm
because
wrestling was
they're
related to
using.
leverage.
I'm saying like you could say the same thing about jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
All I'm saying is yes, they're using or manipulating their leverage relative to each other in an arm wrestling match,
Sure.
right? That should just be to me. It's just apparent. And then when I said that the taller person seems to have an advantage,
I disagree.
you disagree, and I'm just saying this is my observation. I can't explain it. I said I can't
Sure,
explain it.
but then
I'm just giving you my
I think
observation.
we should, if we're going to talk about the leverage, we should stick to leverage instead of talking about like the biomechanical advantages of being tall or like the use of power or explosivity. It's just.
I think that the
hard to
leverage is
focus.
different if you're tall or if you're small, or short. If you have taller or longer or shorter bones, but you're still using leverage in each one of those
Yeah,
applications.
I'm not saying a longer arm person can't use leverage. I'm saying they're at a disadvantage when it comes to work being done by leverage. What's nice about being tall is I get a reach advantage. That's what I get. I don't get a leverage advantage. I get the ability to make contact. I have the ability to engage from further away. But if you get on the inside of my levers, I'm not in a good position.
Yeah, but that reach advantage gives you a leverage advantage.
How?
Because if you're able to get to like you get around on your Kimuras, and you're able to get a wrist, right? You're actually able to apply your leverage.
But shorter
If
people,
I, no,
shorter
stop,
people
stop,
can
stop,
turn
what I'm saying. Let me finish.
Sure.
If I try to get the same thing on you, I can't get to your arm as easily. And so therefore, whatever leverage advantage I may or may not have, I'm not able to even apply it because your arms are longer than mine.
But if you can't apply it because you can't get to it, that means you're not able to apply leverage. So it doesn't.
Yes, that's my whole point.
So
that is the advantage that a tall person has, is that you're able to reach
Yeah, but the reaching isn't leverage. It's just
It's
that I
really-
can
it's-
reach
it's-
and then I can use leverage.
It's the ability to apply, right? So if I have a short little lever and I can't get a fulcrum underneath it with sufficient to like move whatever it is I'm trying to move,
Yeah, but if we both
then I
have
can't even
contact-
employ leverage, right?
If we both
If,
have
on the other
contact-
hand, I have a nice long lever and I have something to rest it on and I can jam it into whatever I'm underneath or whatever sideways that I need to exert the force, I will be able to use the leverage in a situation that someone who is shorter cannot at all, or has a very distinct disadvantage in doing it.
Can I make an analogy?
So
Can I
that
say-
is, I think,
can I
the only
say
point that I'm trying to make. But both people are using leverage, right?
Yeah, sure. Can I make an
Make your
example?
point.
Let's look at fencing, right? Let's say we have a person with a 4-foot foil and we have a person with a 3-foot foil, right? A person with a 4-foot foil is going to be able to make contact and score a point earlier. However, if the person with a shorter foil is able to get to the inside and avoid you making that first point, they will have the leverage advantage over the longer sword and be able to utilize the inside and make their point.
Why
Right?
it's
The
a
person-
leverage advantage if I'm inside?
Because it's
I don't know
no,
what leverage has to do with
it's
that
the
situation.
shorter lever versus the longer lever, right? Like it's I have the
That's just a
ability-
longer sword versus a shorter sword.
Yeah, that's
No one's using leverage in a fencing match, as far as I can tell, right?
really.
Am I levering anything?
Yeah, when
How am I levering
when
something
I
in a fencing
like
match?
parry,
Where's my fulcrum?
the connection between the foils on the parry,
What am I moving?
the other person's sword.
I'm just moving. I'm just pointing. you. I'm just stabbing you.
I'm getting deflecting out, and then if I can use my shorter lever to deflect, right? If I make contact with the shorter point of my sword against the
I
longer
don't
tip,
understand
I'm
your
going to
point.
be able to push it out of the way.
I think you're
pretty
going to have to
easily.
use a different example because I don't understand any of that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Let's see.
I agree with you. Like once I get on inside, I have an advantage because then I can make contact, and your point is away from
Sure. What about
that. I get.
how about if I could reach out and then I can overreach and the person can make contact and use my lever arm to cause me to like come forward, right? Grab it and pull it forward and pull me off balance, right? I have, I guess, according to you, a leverage advantage, but it can still be used against me.
I'm sorry.
Like just having longer arms doesn't give a person a leverage advantage. I know you're very like focused on the give me a lever long enough but I can move a mountain, but this is not what's happening, right? It's not lever versus mountain, it's lever versus lever. A smaller lever, if able to make contact, right, will I think be able to move a longer lever easier than a longer lever can move a shorter lever. That's assuming that if the longer lever is actually making contact at the part further along than the shorter lever has, right? If they meet at the same spot, it's going to be the same thing, right? Like if I have a 4-foot foil and a 3-foot foil, and I meet the 4-foot foil at the 3-foot mark and at the or like 2.5-foot mark, it's going to be like the same leverage. But if I meet the shorter one here at the longer one, this is going to be able to move this one better than this one can move
Again,
this
you're going
one.
back to this fencing analogy that
I
I
don't
don't
know.
really
I think
understand.
that's like the best use of
I need
distance
some
and leverage that I can
I need
think
some
of.
real science,
Or
or not real science because I don't really know physics that well. But my only point from the beginning was that there is leverage involved in arm wrestling. It
Yeah,
seems
but
very
it's
simple,
also-
but there's. Let me finish.
Sure.
That there is leverage involved, and that there seems to be a distinct advantage in the taller arm wrestlers.
Yeah, and I agree. There could be an advantage. I don't think that advantage is leverage.
Okay.
Cool. All right.
But I think to the extent they can get over the hand and they're leveraging the top of the hand
You can
onto
say
the
they're
wrist.
leveraging the top of the hand, but like, are they leveraging are they using leverage in that moment?
What else would they be using?
Like power, force, anything?
Well, of course,
Like,
I mean, yes, they're all incredibly strong people.
Like,
Right? They're not like
I mean,
you
but
never
if-
see a guy like me
if you're
kicking
saying
ass in
anytime,
arm wrestling.
if you're saying that anytime a person moves, you're using leverage, sure, I guess you could say that. If the person moved, yeah, they're using leverage, great, but that doesn't really mean anything in the conversation. We can't talk about anything beyond that.
I mean, if you're able, like, so they talk about like their wrist position being different, you know, like more, like, so everyone thinks this plane,
yes,
but this plane is also
Yes.
important apparently. And, you know, they talk a lot about, you know, manipulating the hands and the thumbs
Mhm.
to turn the wrists in certain ways
Mhm.
in order to, you know, like,
yeah,
you know, like kind of pull, like they're not like doing this,
yeah,
they're more pulling in.
So they're trying to change this arm to make it shorter to give them a leverage advantage.
But it depends on, each person,
Yes.
right? Like, so, they have a lot of different strategies depending on like who they're dealing with, right? Like some guys have that incredible first burst, right? And so the idea is like, can you withstand that first burst?
Sure.
However long that takes. It might be 10 seconds, it might be 30 seconds,
Yeah.
it might be, and then Laurent's talking about how he pumps on things, right? And so that just gets somebody to like, elicits a reaction.
Yeah. Would you describe that pumping action as a use of leverage? Or, I mean, I acknowledge that.
My sense is that there's leverage involved in every single movement.
But would the work or would the effectiveness of this action be because of the leverage or because of the pumping, or is it a combination?
I think it would depend on what you're attempting to accomplish against the person that you're attempting to accomplish it with. If I just do this, right? Like if I just do this, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I assume they must have weight classes and things like that, and probably experience classes. And so, I'm not a person like me. I have no real muscle mass. I'm old. I would go up against other people more or less my same size. I mean, whatever strategies I would use against a professional arm wrestler would be futile because they would just overpower me. They would still be using leverage, right?
Yeah,
but they wouldn't have to use as much leverage or rely as much on leverage because I couldn't really do much to them.
That doesn't make sense either, right? Because, I mean, did we agree that when people, are we agreeing that when people move, they're using leverage?
Yeah, but of course you have, there is some power at the end of the lever.
Yeah, but
right? So if I can apply a lot more power to that lever, I can push a lot more.
Yeah.
Or less, depending on how much power I'm using, what direction I'm, right?
But it's like...
I mean, it's not like power's irrelevant. We don't just I have a long lever, I can just do that and,
there's a tendency, even in jiu-jitsu, to be like, if I have my leverage perfect, I will need zero power behind it and to get the job done. If I have a lever long enough kind of idea.
I mean, you can have a mechanical advantage, but that won't necessarily guarantee anything, right? I could have a mechanical advantage against Jason Kalipa, right? And he could just blow out of it. He could just have more power than I can.
That doesn't sound like a mechanical advantage then.
No, the mechanical advantage is a sense that I could be I could have a Kimura, let's say. I could have everything in the Kimura on him.
Yeah.
And he could still just crush through
But
it.
if he could crush through it, did you have a mechanical advantage?
I probably had something of a mechanical advantage.
I mean,
not enough.
Yeah.
Not enough. Just because you don't succeed doesn't mean you were not so for example, right?
Could have been less.
If I could hit the perfect whatever on I don't know, Bushesha or Hidalgo or Kanan Duarte or Gordon Ryan. I could hit the perfect whatever it is. And it would not surprise me at all if they just go like that and just power out.
No,
let me finish. I could have a perfect mechanical advantage that is not enough to overcome the strength differential between us, or the skill differential for that matter. I mean, having a mechanical advantage doesn't mean a overwhelming, unconquerable, mechanical. It just means it's like, for example, if I'm on top of somebody, cross-side, I have a mechanical advantage, right? Let me finish. I have a mechanical advantage over the person, from a positional perspective, correct? Yes or no?
How do you know?
I don't know. Let's assume. Would you agree?
What do you mean?
No. Would you agree? You don't agree. All right. Well, we can't have.
No. It's like how.
Let's posit. I'll assume, for purposes of my example, that you do have a mechanical advantage over that person because you have gravity and you have your weight.
Sure.
Right. That person may be just so strong they just push you off. Okay. My mechanical advantage was not sufficient to stop that person from doing what they wanted to do and doing what I did not want them to do. Which is just bench pressing me off.
So then when you say mechanical advantage over what? Like the person's ability to do anything, or the person's ability to do the thing that they would have rather have done? Because I feel like
if I have a person flat on their back, right, and I'm chest to chest on them, right, or I'm mounted on top of them.
Sure.
I think most people would agree that you would have a mechanical advantage over that person, or you could have the idea of I have their arm out and an arm lock like this, right? And you would say I have a mechanical, I have my whole body on his arm, and I'm ready to and I have it all good.
Sure.
most people would agree that I have a mechanical advantage in the sense of I have my entire body weight, right? My muscle all on this like here, right? Now I can imagine somebody like the mountain just being able to curl and just being like, I can't do this, right? And so it doesn't. Now on a person who's not the mountain, I could have that, and I could just easily someone who's still much stronger than me, but maybe not as strong as this absolutely most strong, like a gorilla strength. You know, okay, well, I have an advantage, but just because you have an advantage, it does not mean that you are going to win, right? It's like I think the advantage is like if Usain Bolt gave me a 15-yard head start in a 100-meter dash, right? That would give me an advantage, right? That gives me an advantage. Where in golf, you give somebody a handicap. You say, okay, I'm going to give you 15 strokes, all right, that you just start off with. In order to beat you, it's like points. It's a point spread in betting.
Sure.
Right? I'm going to bet on this game, but you are so much better than me. You're the Patriots, and I'm the whatever crappy team, the Bills. That in order to make this an interesting and fair bet, I'm going to spot you 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns. And so for me to win, I just have to keep the game within 2 touchdowns or whatever it is, right? That's the spread. So that's an advantage. I'm giving you an advantage, but that doesn't mean I'm going to win.
No, a point advantage is much different than a mechanical advantage.
Well, I'm just saying, when you ask, like, what is the advantage? I'm using the term advantage in terms of, like, I have, like, a head start in a way, right? But that doesn't mean that the person can't overcome that head start through their superiority of whatever.
Sure, I could say, like, in your experience, this would be a place where you typically would be victorious in a match. And, you know, with the experience that you have, you know, normally this would be an advantageous position.
It's kind of like,
you'd rather be here than where this person is.
It's kind of like EBI where they start you at the end in that advantageous finishing position, right? They give you, no one ever thinks that's an even position.
Yeah, but they're not.
That's not a 50-50
They're not
position.
setting a mechanical advantage. It's an arbitrary positional advantage. It's different. We're talking
No, it's
about,
not arbitrary. That's for sure.
We're talking about like mechanical advantages, right? Like, and I'm trying to pin it down, right? And you're saying, I feel like, you know, you should be able to look at a position and know that you have a mechanical advantage, you know, according to your experience or according to like what is normally taught. But my assertion is that you don't know that you have a mechanical advantage until you were successful in doing the thing that you were doing with your advantage, right? Like,
well, now it becomes like this
epistemological
advantage.
No, yeah, I could take a white belt, put him in that armbar, right? And I could tell him all the things that he has to do. And you could say that, yeah, he has a mechanical advantage, but I'd say, no, he doesn't. Like, you could, you know, put him in that spot, and it doesn't mean that he has a mechanical advantage. Yes, like, there's a potential to get there, right? But it doesn't mean you actually have that advantage unless you're doing everything correctly. And the only way you know that you're doing things correctly is if it works, right? Like,
well, you can do everything correctly against, you know, let's say you had a sample size of 100 people.
Sure.
And you had, you know, break it down, white belt through black belt, through red belt if you wanted, right? And you would be successful so many of the times that you attempted it.
Attempted what?
Whatever it is. Whatever it is. A sweep. It could be any technique in jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Right? That is that you could start off with like some degree of a quote-unquote mechanical advantage.
Sure.
Right? Like you could do a butterfly sweep. And sometimes you get that butterfly sweep and you're able to complete the sweep and get on top.
Sure.
Right? Sometimes you try that and the person switches their hips or does something in response and you get passed.
Okay.
Right? Whatever. But you had, I mean, I know many instances in my own personal experience, maybe that's just anecdotal, where I'm like, I'm going to finish, I have this advantage, I'm able to turn this person over, and they do something in midair, or whatever, or the sweep gets completed and they're able to scramble up.
Okay. This sounds like they have the mechanical advantage.
Well, the situation changes in a moment, right? It changes in a moment. Because it's not static. It's not static, right? We don't do anything.
How can you look at this one starting position and be like, okay, here I have the mechanical advantage, this person doesn't, and then it just like proceeds along this pathway of undefined terms.
You know, I don't know, maybe there is a branch
point,
of physics or mechanics, I'm sure it'd be more engineering than physics, but I'm sure there is a branch of engineering which can describe mathematically sort of the changing, maybe aerodynamics or something like that.
But you can never collect all the information necessary from the system in order to make a determination like that.
Well, it's kind of like,
You can model it maybe.
right, like you have airplanes. Why does I mean, again, I'm venturing into fields I have very little understanding of, but my understanding is that the reason an airplane flies is that they have a wing, it's like a wedge, and basically the air is getting underneath it, and they're able to lift, right? Because they have enough thrust, they have lift, and they're able to fly. Is that correct? Is that more? I'm not a scientist or an engineer.
But every time planes fly, it doesn't happen 100% the same way.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. But you would agree that why does that work? Would you say that there's something mechanical that is working there? Correct.
Well,
that more or less works.
Like,
in certain
how much of it is the plane, how much of it is the sky?
Well, I guess my point is that I'm trying to get to is that 90% of the time, 99.99% of the time, I don't know what the actual, for a high percentage of the time, the plane is able to get aloft and fly, and then using these general principles and a lot of technology, is able to land. Right? Yeah. Now, and there's all sorts of things that are going into right. Yeah. The idea to me that let me just finish this one thought. The idea to me that you're able to rest this. I mean, I don't know how many tons does an airplane? Many tons. Sure. But when it lands on like 3 wheels, right? That's able to cushion and take all the weight of the plane, all the people, and all the baggage and what have you. And it lands. And it's able to do this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, if not thousands of times over the life of its of in service, right? But every once in a while, there is a big storm, right? And
things go wrong.
And maybe there's some weird weather. The winds are going crazy, right? And
the storm gets a mechanical advantage.
And the storm, well, not that the storm has a mechanical advantage, but that the plane, despite all that engineering, all the things that we thought about, could not deal with whatever it is that Mother Nature is throwing
at.
Or chance.
Isn't that a mechanical advantage?
Whose mechanical advantage?
Like nature. The wind speeds and the ability to put force
on my point is that, like the idea of taking off and flying and staying aloft and then landing is something that you can do. And you could say you can explain this in terms of the plane is able to use whatever mechanical advantages it has to achieve liftoff. Sure. Something lifting tons of weight up into the air, right? I mean, amazing. This is like magic to me. Yeah. But every once in a while, there's Mother Nature throws something at it and just wrecks that mechanical advantage that allows it to stay aloft or get aloft.
What about the times?
To me, Jason Kalupa is that Mother Nature. It's not all the time, right? But is that situation where the person is so strong that despite your quote unquote mechanical advantage, they are able to overcome. And maybe that's not just strength.
What about
speed, or maybe it's like explosiveness, or maybe it's whatever it is.
Yeah. I follow. What about the times when it's not Mother Nature's fault? It's the pilot's drunk. Right?
Yes, there's pilot error. Yes.
The wheels don't come.
Yes.
In, right?
Yes.
For whatever reason.
That's more common.
You think you have mechanical advantage, but you don't.
No,
you're on the tarmac or whatever. You're pretty sure the plane's going to take off, and you're pretty sure it's going to land. You don't know, right? You can base it off of past experience. You can base it off of data. This plane will probably fly, right? I probably have a mechanical advantage, right? But there's a reason that people don't fly off in storms, right? I guess.
Oh, they do.
Oh, no.
They do a lot of times.
Sure,
they do.
But if you think that you don't have, or you won't have the ability to get through it, you typically don't do the thing.
That is true.
And usually when people do stuff, they do stuff under the assumption that they do have a mechanical advantage, or they're working towards not being at a disadvantage, right? It's a general work towards progress. But you can never say that you definitely have the advantage over this person, because you don't have all of the control in this situation.
Well, I don't. This happens a lot. I think when you talk in absolutes, then I don't know that really is arguable, right? All you can say is what is more of a high percentage than not. And so that's why in jiu-jitsu we have a hierarchy of positions. We don't say you never know, sure, go for that submission from bottom mount.
But I feel like
You say,
it's
what do you
circular.
say? You say, we're going to work to the position that we have the greatest positional and mechanical advantage.
But the logic is so circular. You're like, oh well, this has a positional advantage because it's such a high percentage move, and it's a high percentage move because it has a mechanical
I think
advantage.
it's very simple. It's not circular at all. You could observe it empirically. You can say, if you attain these specific positions, then your attempts at submissions will become much more likely to succeed. Not guaranteed to succeed, right? But why? Because I have positional and mechanical advantages over my opponent, right? I'm behind them, or I'm on top of them, or I have my knee in their neck, or whatever it is. You could say even just like the mechanical and positional advantage of bending the wrist, which everyone laughs at until your wrist gets bent really fast and hard, and then you wind up tapping or yelling in pain, right? So that's my only point. And I think arm wrestling is a lot like that, where, yes, of course.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just it is very leverage based, and I'm just like not that interested in wrestling, to be honest.
The other thing I would say about wrestling is that it's simple, right? In jiu-jitsu, it can be often very difficult to see.
Well, because it's so much more. There's so many more variables, right?
Yes.
It's not just arm
Yes.
versus arm. It's arm
Yes.
versus arm versus leg versus leg versus arm versus arm. It's like so much.
I don't want to disparage wrestling or arm wrestling in the sense of like, oh, it's simple in the sense of like, it doesn't require a lot of effort or training or
it's
thought.
not easy.
It's not simple in that sense. It's just like, it's
more
simple in the
straightforward.
sense that we just are dealing, at least on the surface,
Yeah.
with two guys holding each other's hands and trying to put their knuckles down on the
But I
table.
feel like it's inherently more simple than jiu-jitsu just by the number of limbs involved.
Yes, that's it. That's all. Like.
It's just a closer inspection of what's actually.
I mean, they actually do use their entire bodies, right? I mean,
And
there is some deep strategy involved.
And there is an element of strategy when you go against a person, like different people. You're going to set up the grips differently. But I don't know. It's just trying to find out. At least for me, I have a really big interest or a thing where when people say leverage in jiu-jitsu context, I like to make sure that it's actually jiu-jitsu, or it's actually leverage. Sorry, because I just feel like it's thrown around a lot.
Yes, that's true.
And I want to.
Because it's the most important thing, and everyone knows that it doesn't matter how strong you are if you have enough leverage.
And
And
it's
I
also,
can access your leverages.
but it's frustrating because like you can't move without using leverage. You can't use your body without inherently using leverage. Your body is made up of levers. So like being like, oh, jiu-jitsu utilizes leverage. Well, yeah. So does everything else you do. Great.
Brushing your teeth.
Eating breakfast uses leverage. Taking a poop utilizes leverage. It's a deep squat bit, but it's like So what about jiu-jitsu is so special that it uses leverage in a way that other sports don't use leverage?
Well, I think there is maybe a qualitative difference. Well, two things, right? Like, yes, every movement uses leverage in some way, right? But there's a qualitative difference in how jiu-jitsu uses leverage that's not necessarily that different from wrestling or any grappling.
What about
Right.
golf? Golf uses
It
leverage.
uses immense amount, like baseball, like hitting a baseball or throwing a ball, right? I mean, that's
Everything.
everything is. But I think in jiu-jitsu, the problem with attributing everything to leverage is that it discounts a lot of other things that occur and that are integral to jiu-jitsu and success or failure
But
in jiu-jitsu.
aren't
Like,
those things also integral in other sports as well? Like
no, I'm not making the case of anything of the other sports or that it is or is not, right? Like this is why in many instances in jiu-jitsu, it's not like two guys just come out and you see them having this intense display of leverage, right? It's not like, oh my God, look at the leverage on that guy. You see guys who wear each other out. They try to get a positional advantage, right? Because why? Because if you just try to out-leverage or out-strength or whatever, Buchecha or Hidalgo, I mean, they're just going to like flick you off of them, right? I mean, they're just going to laugh at you.
Yeah.
And, you have to get people tired. I mean, there's a value in getting people just out being a better conditioned athlete than somebody else, right? I mean, there's a reason to, in my mind, why the lighter weights don't win absolutes. It's because technique it does not conquer all.
But they have shorter levers. Is it because they have shorter levers?
They're smaller.
Yeah.
They're smaller, and I think it is actually hard. I mean, I know from training with you that like trying to heel hook you is very difficult because your legs are so damn long. So I mean, now other people may have figured this out, but like when your legs are back here and you're able to cross your feet behind my back,
yeah.
right? I mean, it's not that I can't like get, if I could get onto your heel, like maybe I could,
yeah,
like
have an
heel hook you or foot lock you.
I mean, if you get on it, you do have a leverage advantage, but it is so far away.
It's very difficult to do.
My main experience with my interactions with leverage has been with like Elias.
When you first met leverage, tell us about this story. You first met leverage.
We met in the back alley behind the bar.
Hey man, you got some of that leverage? I need some of that leverage.
No, like working with
access you.
Elias, Laird, Trevor, all these short people who can always seem to just get to the inside with their elbows and make space, and there's nothing I can do about it, and I hate it, and I'm probably just really bitter about that. Yeah, I don't know. This does, I guess, bear re-examination, but I've always.
Well, it works the other way too, where, I mean, at least in some positions, where if it kind of goes back to your fencing example, which is, you know, if your hand is way out here, and you're trying to get to my wrist, and my wrist is all the way down here, like you're not going to be able to get to the wrist control, you know, and I'll be able to wiggle my way out, theoretically.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, that's why jiu-jitsu to me, when you have two people that are roughly the same proportions,
Yeah.
I mean, it could go either way, right? That's a skill, but it takes a lot of skill when you're a very tall athlete or a very short athlete to be able to deal with. It's like left-handed pitching to me, right? Like I'm 5'10". Most people are within an inch or two height-wise of me, right? I'm very average, and so you get used to just when you're dealing with other average-sized people. But when you deal with somebody who's 5 foot or 6'5", this is now it's a whole different thing. And that's, you know, like the proportions and your ability to deal with those different proportions. It's like you're probably in the top 10% of height, you know, in
People.
Americans at least. I mean, I don't know what if you threw the Chinese or
Human people.
What?
Human people.
Human peoples. You know, you deal with a lot more people like me than I deal with people like you.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, right? Like once you lower down, you talk about like Elias and Laird. Now they're probably another 3 or 4 inches shorter than me.
But they're used to dealing with people longer and taller than anyone.
So that's the other thing, right? Like, so they always used to deal with tall people.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more of the same.
Except in their weight division, right? So I used to have this, I still have a friend, but my buddy Jason, who's like 5'2" or something.
Yeah.
And he used to just kill everybody in handspits. Not everybody, he's really, really good. Because he's 5'2", and he's like as strong or stronger than me. You know, like I'm not that I'm huge or strong, but just that he's not, you know, I've got 6 inches in height on him. And he's stronger than me in a lot of positions and a lot of lifts. But when he went to Worlds and went up against the Japanese athletes, they would murder him. Because they're used to dealing with people that are 5 feet tall. No, I mean, it's not a joke. Those guys deal with, and he couldn't deal with the speed that they put on him.
Yeah.
Because all their training partners look like him.
Yeah.
He has like 1 or 2 guys that look like him, and they're not the same skill level. So it becomes.
But then that still doesn't. Yeah, it goes beyond the leverage and not leverage.
It's not, jiu-jitsu is not just leverage, and it's not skill in the sense of like technical skill.
I think it's like a person's ability to master the best efficacy of their own levers available, right? Like I have tall levers
Across the whole spectrum of potential competitors.
but I don't need to get good at like how like your bones work for you. Like I'm gonna work with what I got.
Right.
And like, hey, like maybe I might have a leverage disadvantage when a person is on the inside, but on the outside I've got good leverage, right? So like me personally, I like staying on the outside of the game and kind of working my way around, and then when I can establish a position, then I'll start working to the inside. versus like short people in my experience, they like to get up
They want to
super
close the distance. It's like fighting. It's like a boxing match, right? Like you don't want to be on the outside where the person's able to like be the big brother on you, right? And just like put your hand on your head.
So it's like, you know, in certain places I will have the advantage, and if I can stay there, it'll be good. But in certain places, this person will have the advantage, and like if he can get into those places, I'm gonna have a really bad time. And it's hard to be like who overall has the best leverage, because it's just so much more complicated. It's just like layers upon layers of complexity on top of that.
It's really like who has the better leverage in any given position or situation.
But even then, like, because it's not just like, because there's the potential leverage that could be used, but then there's also like what you're aware of and like what you're able to do.
I mean, if you're dealing with two athletes that are more or less equal, right, in skill level, experience, athleticism, whatever you build up, whatever characteristics or whatever variables you want to add. You say two guys or women, and how they match up. I think technique does go a long way to equalizing things when there is a disparate strength level or whatever it is, right? Weight or height or whatever. Being more technical will bridge that gap potentially. But when the other person's also technical, then you're in big trouble, right? Technical meaning like you're aware of and can execute
techniques,
all the applicable techniques, and that's it, or at least the ones that work the best, right? In that particular situation, right? Like if you come up on a single and I don't know how to defend a single, it doesn't matter how big or strong I am, really, right? If you're good at finishing the single, I'm probably going to wind up on my back.
But you might have a good idea.
Well, look, there's always that like fighter's chance, right? Like if I'm just a big, strong, or just an athletic person, I might just be able to power out of things.
It doesn't have to be. You could just believe in yourself, and
you could just believe. Yes, you totally could. I wouldn't
rely on.
I could just be athletic, right?
It's not always just athleticism, right? This is a brain game. You can have.
But I'm saying if you don't know anything. If I don't know anything and I just happen to be very athletic,
the harder it is to have good ideas.
I trained once with an NBA athlete, and that was eye-opening.
Like at Orange Theory?
No. At like Henzo's, there was a guy. I don't know if he was on the Knicks or he was like he was like on the practice squad or whatever it is. This guy was really, really tall. He was taller than you. And I think I was a blue or a purple belt, but it's like I can't do anything with this guy because he's not only was he really long, like his limbs were just super long. But he was really strong. Like he was a really athletic guy. And he didn't know anything. He just knew how to be big and strong.
Do
you know what I mean?
That reminds me of
It's kind of like a spider. A spider or an ant is like for its size, super strong, super athletic, would jack up anything. It's on its red. But to me, it doesn't matter how strong a spider is because I can always just step on it, right?
I went to St. Louis once to visit a friend, and part of the deal was I was allowed to stop by a local gym and train, and so I stopped by. I think I was a white belt at the time, just like getting my times in, and everyone was really nice, rolled with everyone, and I remember like the last roll, it's like this 300-pound purple belt.
What belt were you at the time?
White.
You were white?
Maybe a couple stripes,
And you were like, size doesn't matter, technique conquers all.
I was really happy to be training. So I rolled with this guy, and we slapped hands. I start in his guard, because I'm just trying to not let him on top of me. And he just reaches up and he grabs my collars and he just pulls them. And it was like, it wasn't the first time I'd seen collar chokes, right? It's like we were a collar choke academy or club, basically. It's all we did. So it was like cool collar chokes, and I was like, oh, this guy doesn't have deep grips. This is gonna be a shitty collar choke, no problem. And he just keeps squeezing, and it's just like all that space just disappeared, and I just remember just feeling like I was in a trash compactor.
And then you went to sleep.
No, I tapped, but it was like this weird feeling of just how different rolling with this person is, and how much I needed to change my expectations the next time I roll with them, because a person's crappy collar grip when they're 120 pounds is a lot different than a person's crappy collar grip when they're 300 pounds.
Yes.
And, you could be at a mechanical disadvantage with your crappy collar grip, but, if you've got the physicality or just like the mentality to back it up, that may be all you need, right? Like, so it's not the be all end all. Like, having these little advantages that we teach you is not all that you need.
I mean, sometimes it's, I think that's 100% right. I mean, the advantages that you have in particular positions against someone roughly your size, at strength, athletic level, fine. Yeah, you're gonna win on that. But when the person is, or it doesn't, they don't. I mean, we mentioned Galip a lot, but I've met guys that are, my size or smaller that are incredible athletes.
Yeah.
And if they got their arms around your neck, I don't care what you thought you were going to do, they are not going to let you. Can't, like, at least I couldn't, right? Now maybe if I were on their athletic level, I could pry off their arms, but they have such good grips. They're so tenacious.
What about this? Reminds me, you know how jiu-jitsu has those like weird little meta rules where like don't cross collar choke someone from their guard. Don't like I don't know. That's the best one I can think of. To where it's like you shouldn't do that because even though you might be able to choke the person, when you're in this position, you're at a mechanical disadvantage. Your arms are way out, and even though you have an attack, it's going to be easier for them.
You're exposing yourself to a better attack.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I forget where I was going with that.
Meta rules: don't do this because you expose yourself to that. But why not? Maybe you should still do it.
It doesn't mean it won't work, right? Just because the mechanical advantage says that this person doing this thing will be at a disadvantage, I still need to take it seriously, right?
Yes.
Even though the person is at a disadvantage, it's still a threat, right? I'm still getting choked if I don't do anything. So there's a tendency, I think, for especially like white and blue belts to like scoff at things that they don't think are real.
Well, it's like headlocks to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Like a headlock shouldn't work.
Like,
we should be able to use our leverage to escape a headlock, right? And we tell people that, and it's true if you know how. But just because like there's the potential of you having the ability to do it doesn't mean you have the ability.
Well, we teach all of these escapes, right? You teach a lot of escapes.
Uh-huh.
We teach a lot of escapes in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And we teach counters,
Yeah.
right? But more often than not, when somebody gets caught in a solid submission, they get finished.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's not to say that people don't escape all the time, right? But it's better to not be in that position.
That would have been such a great counter argument for you. Because like if a person, maybe the idea that like escapes shouldn't work, right? Like, because if the person on top does everything correctly, like your escape shouldn't be effective. The only time escapes really work is when you take advantage of a mistake or a weakness that the person is unaware of, right?
It could be other things though, right? You could have somebody has an injury, or somebody isn't flexible, or somebody isn't strong enough, or
What do you mean?
you can have somebody who, right, like in the beginning of jiu-jitsu, like when I first started in the first couple of years, if I got a triangle on you, I would not let go.
Yeah.
And you could like turn me over and stack me up and do whatever you wanted. I'm not gonna let go.
Yeah.
So unless you can physically you could lift my leg off of my other leg,
Yeah.
or physically get something in and wedge me apart,
Yeah.
I was not going to let you. Same thing, if I had an arm, I was just gonna hang off your arm. You could pick me up off the ground, I'm just gonna arch into your arm, right?
Yeah.
And what happens over time?
You get dropped on your
I
head.
get dropped on my head, I get stacked into oblivion, I have tingling up and down my arms, and at some point as time goes on, you say to yourself, hey, if I want to continue to do jiu-jitsu, I can't hold on to these things for dear life. So sometimes a person is going to let go of their own volition because they don't want to get, or they're going to tap of their own volition, not because they have to, but because they decide to do so, right?
Never mind.
I use this example sometimes. It's like when I was at the Worlds, a guy had me in a guillotine, right? I had a very lucid moment this was like the second or third one I had been in, I had a very lucid moment where I was like, okay, I don't have to tap right now. But if I don't, I'm going to have an injury that is going to last a long time.
That
Right?
means you have to tap.
No.
What are you talking about?
No, because you see this all the time in competition where guys decide not to tap.
Yeah.
They just say, I will accept this injury.
Okay.
Right? And they get injured or not. I mean, sometimes you don't actually get injured, even though probably you should have, or the chances were good that you were going to be. So all I'm saying is like, you can get out of something like a triangle or an arm lock or something like along those lines, or someone escapes from it or doesn't tap to it because they just decide like, I will accept this injury or the potential for injury. Whereas other people will say, you know what, I have this person in a triangle, and yeah, they're gonna ragdoll me around and like stack me, but I'm still not gonna let go, just because I'm not gonna let go, right? And your escape will not work in that situation, right? The person just has decided to accept, unless you like physically break that person, right? So
wait, I'm a little confused on. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked, but your definition of like the submission thing, where like I choose to give up, I choose to tap because I'm afraid of injuring myself.
or I know there's a good chance of being injured.
Yeah, a good chance of being
And
injured.
I'm using that as an example of also like.
But you're not submitting.
No. So
you're tapping because
what I'm
you don't get
analogizing,
injured.
I'm using that as an analogy, or sort of like the flip side of, when you have somebody in a submission and they're defending that submission.
Yeah.
And defending it in a way that has a good chance of injuring you. And you can persist in holding on to it, even though you may get injured, right? It's like I have you in a triangle and you pick me up into the air. Now, some people will let go.
Yeah.
And say like, I don't want to be injured. And you'll get out. You have escaped, right?
No, not really.
You have gotten out of the submission. The person has decided to change tact, right?
I mean, it depends on the rules. If we're like rolling and you pick me up, I'm
not saying like different situations. I'm just saying like there are situations where an escape works because the person that is applying the submission has decided that there is some risk of injury.
You're making them an offer they can't refuse.
Or they're deciding that there's something else that they would rather do.
Okay.
Right? Like, so you can escape. It's like you have the Kimura trap on me, and I escape the arm lock, but you let me escape so that you can apply like a rear triangle or something.
Okay.
Right? It's just, I didn't escape the arm lock. You just transitioned into a better submission.
Yes.
But you may have, in that process, the person may mess up, right? Maybe we slip, or maybe I'm able to get my arm, my elbow just gets a little bit inside of your elbow, and I escape that. You might think, I'm using these examples of like, we learn these escapes, and in many instances they succeed, but not because they're superior to the submission, but because there's other variables that are at play, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have somebody who has like a locked on triangle and they just decide like, I am not letting go, right? This is life or death. This is the world championship. You're probably not going to be, if it's fully locked in, you're probably not going to be able to get them unless you hurt them, right? Unless you
One of my favorite
damage them.
thought ideas is, all right, say you have one person who knows how to do the perfect armbar, right? And you've got another person who has full knowledge of the perfect armbar defense.
Yes.
They set up an armbar, and the armbar is armbarring, and the defender is defending. Who wins?
Nobody.
Why?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think of examples. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a situation where this person is like the best.
Yeah.
And has something.
Like, is there possible to have a technique so good that another technique cannot counter it in jiu-jitsu?
I mean, it depends on what stage you get to, and
like any like from start to finish maybe. Like a series of movements so divine that there's just like no mistake that can be made on the path to submission.
I don't think that
Technique so good that it can't be out techniqued by other techniques.
I don't think so.
So
I don't think so.
break it down into the stages. At what stage would you say that, like, if you're late into your offensive game, like how deep into your armbar do you think that a perfect armbar should be inescapable? Like when it's fully extended, when it's over here.
Because fully extended, you could
Still
people
escape.
get out all the time.
So
It depends on who it is too, right? Like
no.
if Hodger Gracie gets your arm fully extended, you're I mean I don't know too many people that can get out of it.
What if he had Gordon Ryan's arm fully extended? You know.
Well, it gets complicated because a lot of people will take the break,
Okay.
right? Like so, like here's a good example. This is a perfect example.
I mean, I wouldn't call
Speaking of
letting your
Hodger.
arm get broken a proper defense, but okay.
I mean, like, if the goal is
How about choke?
no. I mean, you could just go to. That's why chokes are better than arm locks
Yeah,
because you
'cause,
can't just say like, hey, I'm just gonna let him choke me.
Yeah.
You know,
'Cause you'll go
that's why chokes are better.
Yes. Agreed.
You know, like Jacques Ray and Hodger Gracie,
Both.
when Hodger had his arm, right?
Yeah.
And Jacques Ray is not a guy who is not.
Was that the MMA match?
No, that was the World Championships.
There was another Jacare in an MMA match who got his arm broken, right? And he was like dancing around in the.
That might be the same Jacques Ray.
Yeah.
I mean, there are two Jacques Rays, but it could, before he went to MMA, he was in Jiu Jitsu
Yeah.
and he won the worlds.
Yeah.
And he won that year against Hodger. Hodger had him. He was up on points, and then Hodger arm locked him.
Yeah.
And he ate the arm lock.
Yep.
He broke his arm,
Yep.
and he finished the match
Yep.
with his arm dangling by his side, running away.
And we're talking about him to this day.
Yes. So I think the thing is with the escapes, at least from breaks, is that people will accept the break.
It's a
And
break.
so in order to, I mean, Jacare did get out.
Yeah.
He did escape, but he did so
Do
in
you
a manner.
consider a break an escape? Is that like the last strategy? Like I'm just gonna whatever happens.
I mean, you
happens?
can't be tapped if you just let it break.
Gross.
I mean, you can get to the point where maybe the ref will step in and stop your match, but they're not going to stop it.
They don't stop it, right? Unless they're like screaming and you're breaking.
I think they stopped. They've
Did they stop
stopped.
Jacare?
No, they did not stop Jacare. I think they stopped. What's his face when he got total held and his leg went that way. Who was that? That was the Gracie Baha guy. That was you know what I'm talking about, right?
No,
Edwin Najmi's
I specifically.
Hamla
don't-
Baha,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
I don't want to think about my feet pointing toward the butt.
I'm not sure that Enzo tapped when his elbow was broken. I think they may have stopped that, or maybe they threw a tap against Sakuraba. But I mean, that's why like it showed.
Yeah, he had a Kimura, didn't he?
Sakuraba had the Kimura,
Yeah.
and then but I don't think Enzo tapped to that. I'm not sure what they did,
I thought
like
they threw
what the
a tap.
rule was that they stopped, whether his corner stopped or stopped the match, or if the ref stopped it. But
And then of course the helio,
and then there's the Helio.
which is like the first one, the groundbreaker, and everyone's been having their arms.
But
broken
getting
since.
out, like Gary Tonin is very good at getting out of things without, well, as far as we know, damaging his body.
Yeah.
Trying to think. I mean, Vinny Magalhaes is very good, but he's another guy who will accept injuries in order to escape. I mean, he had a great one where he was fully armbarred by, I think it was Verdun, and he just sat there. And you know, Hodger also. I think Hodger against Buchecha, there was a moment where Buchecha in the first match at Metamoris, where Buchecha had Hodger in an arm lock, like a fully extended arm lock, and Hodger was able to get out, doing something very similar to
Who was the Gracie who was known for like you could put him in a full rear naked choke?
That's Hickson.
Hickson. Yeah.
That's Hickson.
I mean, I guess to me that would be like pinnacle jiu-jitsu, where like
You just cannot be submitted.
no matter where you are, no matter what position, you could have your arm fully straight. You could have like a person on each leg, and you know, and you could find a way out through sheer cleverness.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Hickson could get. I mean, I've never heard anyone say like, "Nah, Hickson wasn't."
But it's like
Everyone that's ever rolled with Hickson is like, he's that good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard to believe that he's not that good.
Yeah. I don't know. It makes me wonder though, did he just like not run into, you know?
I mean, it wasn't like he wasn't surrounded by
Yeah.
a lot of really, really good people in their own rights.
Yeah.
I guess you'd get really good at defending if, you know, if all your brothers and cousins were there trying to choke you out every
But
day.
like, wouldn't they get good at choking the guy? Like, at
You
the
know,
same
there's always
time?
someone who's the best
But
in any group.
even if someone's the best, like, there's usually someone in the gym who can get a little blood in the water from the guy.
I mean, Hickson came close to losing. I mean, it's not like he was totally undefeated. I mean, his matches were not, you know, always like super one-sided.
Yeah.
You know, they were back and forth.
But like, I can't imagine training with a group of people over an extended period of time and having them not eventually be able to learn what I do and do it back at me kind of.
I mean, the problem is that those. I mean,
Like,
if you're always progressing, like if everyone's together, there's always going to be somebody who's kind of like above the other people.
But there's always going to be that one person who tries harder than everyone else, who goes past the average progression level and catches up. You know, maybe not always, but
I mean, I don't know that anybody was good enough to do that to Hickson. There's always got to be one guy who's the best, at least for a little while.
But it's always for a little while.
Well, I mean, they haven't always lived together, right? That was for a few years in Torrance,
Yeah.
right? That wasn't for 25 years. So, I don't know.
Immovable force.
I mean, I just don't know anybody who can get out of a rear naked choke that is fully on.
Me? You.
Anybody. Fully on.
Fully out?
Fully on.
Try.
I already tried, I already got you.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did.
No.
I totally did.
No.
Yeah, I totally did.
totally escaped.
No, you did. I
I
let you
don't know.
out. Because I didn't want you to go to sleep. Because I didn't want to choke you out on live stream.
No.
If you guys want me to choke out Kevin on live stream, you can vote.
You'll have to subscribe to my OnlyFans for that.
All right, see you guys.